Israel is a country of less than 10 million people, and yet its prime minister has shaped wars, influenced superpowers, and altered the course of global politics. Not just within the Middle East, but far beyond it. This is Benjamin Netanyahu. And to understand him, you don't start with Israel, you start with scale. Because Netanyahu represents something unusual, a leader whose influence consistently exceeds the size of the country he leads. In many ways, his story begins outside Israel. Netanyahu spent a significant part of his early life in the United States. He studied there, lived there, absorbed how power works in the West, how media shapes perception, how narratives influence policy. At the same time, his father was a deeply ideological historian, rooted in a vision of Jewish nationalism shaped by centuries of conflict. So from the very beginning, Netanyahu sits at an intersection, an American understanding of power and a nationalist understanding of survival. That combination is rare, and it becomes important later. But the moment that defines him doesn't happen in a classroom. It happens in 1976, during Operation Entebbe, a hostage rescue mission carried out thousands of kilometers away in Uganda. It's considered one of the most daring military operations in modern history, and leading that mission was Netanyahu's older brother, Yonatan Netanyahu. He didn't make it back. For most people, that would be a personal tragedy. For Netanyahu, it becomes something else. Because in Israel, Entebbe isn't just a mission, it's a national myth. And suddenly, his personal loss becomes tied to the identity of the state itself. From that point on, security is no longer theoretical, it's personal. And that personal lens begins to shape a very specific political doctrine. Because most leaders treat negotiation as a way to avoid conflict. Netanyahu doesn't. He treats conflict as a tool within negotiation. For him, power comes first, and peace, if it comes at all, comes after. You see this in his approach to Iran. You see it in his military posture. And most importantly, you see it in what didn't happen. For years, the idea of a two-state solution, Israel and Palestine existing side by side, was central to global diplomacy. It wasn't perfect, but it was the framework. Under Netanyahu, that framework doesn't collapse overnight. It simply stops moving. Settlements expand, security concerns dominate, negotiations stall, and slowly, almost quietly, the conversation shifts. The two-state solution isn't rejected outright, it's just outpaced by a different reality. But this is where Netanyahu becomes more than just a national leader. Because his real influence doesn't stop at Israel's borders. It extends into how global power itself operates. Take the United States. Over the years, Netanyahu has built deep relationships within American political circles, most notably with Donald Trump. During that period, US policy in the Middle East shifts significantly, from Iran to Jerusalem to regional alliances. And what's striking is this: these are decisions made in Washington, but they align closely with Netanyahu's long-standing positions. Which raises a bigger question: where does influence actually begin? And then there's another layer. Before all of this, Netanyahu served as Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. That experience matters because it teaches something most leaders never fully master. That modern power isn't just about military strength, it's about narrative, about framing, about telling a story that the world accepts. And Netanyahu understands this deeply, whether it's speeches at the UN or messaging around security threats. He operates not just as a policymaker, but as a communicator of power. And then comes the regional shift, the Abraham Accords, a series of agreements that normalize relations between Israel and several Arab nations. For decades, this was considered unlikely, even impossible. And yet, it happens. Not through traditional peace frameworks, but through strategic realignment. Once again, negotiation doesn't begin with compromise, it begins with leverage. And this is where everything connects. Because Netanyahu is not just a product of Israel, he's a preview of something larger. A model of leadership that is becoming more common. Leaders who are deeply media aware, security focused, globally networked, and capable of influencing systems beyond their own borders. So the story of Netanyahu is not just about his decisions, or his politics, or even his controversies. It's about what he represents, a shift. From negotiation through compromise to negotiation through power. From geography defining influence to strategy redefining it. Because today, power doesn't always belong to the biggest country or the strongest economy. Sometimes, it belongs to the leader who understands the system better than anyone else. And maybe that's the real story here. Not just who Benjamin Netanyahu is, but what he tells us about how the world works now. Because if one leader from a small country can shape global politics this deeply, then maybe the rules have already changed. And maybe Netanyahu isn't the exception. He's the blueprint.